If you forgot to do it with the email or you were out yesterday and you didn't see your email, in order to really engage with today's session, you're going to need to have an Intact account. It's totally free. You just have to go to the little join us button at the top. You give them your email. So the only thing you're giving away is your email. So go ahead, and if you haven't done that yet, I did drop that in the chat. It's like the very first conversation in the chat. So please do that, and I'll drop it one more time just in case. Or you should actually be able to click on it, I think, but we'll see. Alrighty. So just make sure you have that. Just a few reminders as we get started, just to be mindful of your mic. Make sure you're muted if you need to be muted, and unmute when you want us to hear what you have to say. Video is on unless for some reason you absolutely can. If you're having bandwidth issues, or I know we have a friend has some friends who are traveling today, but they're still participating. So we understand, but please try to have it on as much as you can. A reminder that this is a recorded session, and that's so that you guys can go back to it later if you need to. Reminder to log in with a district account. You will not have full access to all of the features if you don't log in with your district account. Try to join from a computer if you can, as much as possible. And as always, just take a break if you need it. Just camera off, mic off. Let us know in the chat you had to step away. We understand it's Saturday and you're at home with kids and dogs and all the things. So go ahead and take care of yourself however you need to do that. Our team norms welcome multiple viewpoints. Be courageous and speak your truth, but also own those intentions that might come with it. Participate respectfully. If you have questions, if something doesn't sit right, or you have a question that you need clarified, don't hesitate to ask. We are a small group. This is our last cohort, as you guys know, so we are a pretty small group. So I just drop that question in the chat, or you can just raise your hand, whatever you feel most comfortable with. And most importantly, honor our time together. Make sure that you devote your attention to those speaking and sharing. And as I always say, either be there or be here. If there's somewhere else you absolutely have to be, go do that thing. Otherwise, try to be here as much as possible because we value your expertise and your opinions. Staying connected, just as a reminder, we have the meeting link, the directory, the discussion board, and all related documents live in our Kentucky Leads SharePoint site. So make sure you're connected there. In case you missed it, last month we talked about collaborative leadership. There is a link to the session in the Kentucky SharePoint site, and you're welcome to go back there. Today, what we're going to be talking about, we're going to do a quick check-in with the team, with each other. We're going to learn about post-secondary transition. That's where going to be the heart of our conversations today. And of course, we will have some time to share thinking with our teammates. Mike's going to share some reminders and updates with us.
Thanks, Shasta. We hope everyone is registered for courses. If you haven't, you need to ASAP. I know most of the universities have started classes. I was curious if you've started your classes, actually attended your first class or any one of your CERT classes. Can you just raise your hand there, just trying to get a feeling how many folks have started classes yet this semester? Got a couple. Very good. So, yeah, more there. Perfect. Yeah. So anyway, over the next week or two, depending on which university you're at, those will be cranking up. So encourage you, if you've not registered, really need to do it ASAP. Please talk with your advisor. They can still get you in. Secondly, if you do miss class, some things do come up. A Saturday seminar, things do come up, we know that, but please go back. Shasta was mentioning we've got the recorded sessions, and go back and view those. Then there's a one-page information sheet we'd like you to fill out, and please send that back to us as soon as possible once you miss that class. So with that, that's all the updates. Have a good semester.
Yeah, and just a reminder to be engaged with that discussion board. We just started a conversation yesterday as a leadership team around the evaluation that comes as a Kentucky Lead Scholar and being a part of the program. And so part of that evaluation is conversations on the discussion board. There were some really good questions. I know Matthew specifically asked some questions related to transition that were really helpful that we shared with Allison as she prepared. So again, appreciate you guys asking questions on there. It's a really good opportunity to hear from each other. I know we as the leads team try to hop on and respond when we can. I try to do that weekly. And of course, you can always email us directly if there's any questions that maybe you aren't getting answers to. Also, just a reminder, OSIL Spotlight. There have been so many amazing things coming out in OSIL Spotlight lately. And so just a reminder, if there's something great happening at your school, talk to your DOS or your assistant DOS or whoever that might be, your principal. Talk to them and say, hey, let's get this highlighted. Let's talk about this really great thing that's happening in our school, so we can get that spotlighted. All right, before we move into content, can we clarify anything? And Natalie, I see your hand is still up. Is that from previous, or do you have a question?
It was previous. I didn't realize.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Anything we can clarify before we go? All righty. Well, just before we hop into Allison's presentation, I wanted to just kind of highlight a little something you guys are probably familiar with and you've heard about, the Portrait of a Learner. You've seen KDE's Portrait of a Learner, and there's a big push around that. Really, really good information, really good, thinking. And as I was thinking about Allison's presentation today, I don't come out of a high school background. I came out of an primarily elementary background, and I didn't fully understand at that time. I didn't think about transition because my kids were young, right? They left me at 5th grade. But as I look at Portrait of a Learner, as I think about Portrait of a Learner, it really has got me thinking about how transition for us as special educators and leaders of special education, it isn't just a high school thing, right? This is something that really we start preparing our students for preschool or kindergarten. We start thinking about them and their success and their ability to be independent way before that. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight that, because it's one of the things that Portrait of a Learner says is aspirations for what every learner will know and be able to do when they leave school. And so even if you're not in a high school setting right now, even if you don't specifically work with transition age students right now, one of the things that we're going to ask you guys to think about, sort of like your task today, your note-taking sheet today, is this adapt, adopt, apply. So what I want you to do is just however you take notes, whether it be digitally or on a piece of notebook paper, just give yourself 3 columns, 3 sections. And as you're listening to Dr. Johnson, be thinking about adapt, right? So how will you adapt this information? I know some of you, Matthew, again, you guys work directly with high school students, so that won't be too big of a stretch for you. Some of you may be in a leadership position, school psych position, or an ARC chair, right? So just be thinking about how you will adapt this information. Adopt. How will you adopt it into your work and planning as a leader? And then apply. How will you apply it in your current role? So just kind of be thinking about that. Again, as we hear from Dr. Johnson, adapt, adopt, apply. Before we leave today, that's kind of how we're going to come back together and reflect on our learning. Will be through for this note-taking sheet. So just make sure you have that somewhere. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Allison Johnson, who works at the OSIL here at KDE in our transition unit. Are you ready, Allison?
I am. Good morning. Thank you. Real quick, Shasta, I don't remember what we decided. Am I managing the slides or are you managing the slides?
No, take it. You take them.
Okay, perfect. How do I take them, Shasta? I need to
should just
share
be able
my
to
screen.
hit share. Yeah.
Okay,
or
perfect.
if you, just hit share.
Yep.
Is it working?
It's slow. My compute Teams doesn't like me today. My apologies.
Let me go into stop sharing too from my side. Looks like I'm not there.
There we go. All right. Thanks, y'all, for bearing with me. Appreciate that. As Shasta said, I'm Dr. Allison Johnson. I'm the Assistant Program Administrator for the Transition Education Unit at the KDE Office of Special Education Early Learning. I've been at OSIL for about 4 years. Prior to that, I taught in Scott County at their CTE school. And prior to that, I actually taught in Massachusetts. But What I really want to know is hear information from you all. So why is it not advancing? There you go. So we have a question for you. What does a happy adult life look like to you? So if you'll just take any device and go to that QR code, it's going to take you to a word cloud. And you should have an option to put in a couple of different things, but we just want to know, wide open, what does it mean when I say, hey, I want you to have a happy adult life? All right, I'm seeing some stuff coming in. So hobbies, a schedule, friends, mentally stimulating, friendship, family, experiences, meet needs, decision making, seeing some more friendship again, loved, feeling secure. Absolutely. So the real big ones that I see, which of course in a word cloud means that many people said it, was love, family. I'm seeing some variations on that. Loved, friendships, friends, contentment. Absolutely. So I would completely agree. All of these are what I think a happy adult life looks like also. And in fact, I will maybe, this is my happy adult life, right? So when I think of a happy adult life for myself, this is what I think, right? So that first picture on the left of the five of us standing, that's my work life. That is the transition. It's most of our transition education unit. We're still expanding. And we had just presented to at a CTE conference about supporting special education students in CTE, career technical education. And it was really well received, and that was really validating. Yes, Bill Bates is phenomenal. And it went really well, and that was a real source of pride, I think, for our unit, but also that was the end result of a lot of work. And I think happy adult life, I also think about like my community and how I interact with my community and my recreation. So that's my spouse and I kayaking on the Kentucky River in Frankfort, actually. But I also think about, my independent life and being able to live by myself and have my own space. And so that third picture is one of my early apartments, but it was the point in time when I finally had enough money that I could have furniture that I didn't get from the Goodwill. And so we're loading up the cart at IKEA to build some bookshelves because I love to read and I have really far too many books and bookshelves. And I also think about my happy adult life is that really being civically engaged. I think it's really important to vote and to know my community, both local and state and federal. And so that's really important to me. And I also know, and some of you said this in that word cloud about, we want to be mentally stimulating. I'm a lifelong learner, which is in some ways really ironic because although I'm a fourth generation Kentucky teacher, I grew up saying I would absolutely never be a teacher. There's no way in the world. And yet here I am, and I actually have my doctorate in education, and who knew? But this is a picture of me and one of my friends at a seminar all about education because I wanted to know more. And so when we think about, or at least when I think about happy adult life, I think about all of these pieces, right? It's not just that I'm working, although working provides me with mental stimulation and connection and really helps build my life as a human and as an adult, but it's also about recreation, being a part of my community, being able to live the way I want to live, and really stimulating my mind and thinking through what I want. And as we think about transition education for students with disabilities, and frankly, for all students, that's what we want. The Kentucky Board of Education has put out a statement and they say that every single Kentucky graduate should be exiting our system a critical thinker, a communicator, an empowered learner, a collaborator, and an engaged citizen. And based on your word cloud and thinking about how I think about my happy adult life, that's where I am. And I think that's probably where most of you all are. And that's where we want all of our students to be. And the key here is that we know some of our students, particularly our students in special education, need some extra supports to get here. But transition education is not an add on, It's not an extra for our students with disabilities. It is really the core of education for all of our students, because all of our students, when they enter our education, kindergarten, preschool, preferably, but when they enter, this is our goal for them, and these are the pieces that we want them to have as adults. And that's what transition education is really about. Now, we do talk about it very specifically for students with disabilities in slightly different ways. So I wanted to start our conversation today with state of the state. Where are we now, specifically thinking about transition education or transition to adulthood, so post-school outcomes after high school for students with disabilities? Because we're talking to y'all are future directors of special education. That's who our focus is. We're looking at that subpopulation. So I have here a graph, and I'm going to be quiet in a minute for about 30 seconds. So I want you all to just take a look at this. I'm not going to give you any context beyond what's on the picture right now. And I want to know what you notice and what questions you have. You can feel free to pop it in the chat, or I'll open it up for comments in about 30 seconds. But I want to give everyone think time. Questions? All right, I'll start the think time now then. All right, so it's been just about 30 seconds. I know some of you all may have some background knowledge and know a little bit more about this chart than others, and that's okay, because all I want to know right now is, what do you notice? Feel free to unmute or put in the chat. The chat, I see someone said indicator 14, go yo-yo, or higher ed enrollment has decreased. Yes. Yep, so that is activating some prior knowledge, which is fantastic. Higher ed enrollment, so that is actually that red line, orangish red, 14A at the bottom. And so what that is talking about is this is a dipstick in time, right? So this is a survey that's completed for all special education students 1 year after they exit high school to see what they're doing. And so that red line shows us what percentage of 1 year after high school students said they were enrolled in a 2 or 4 year higher education program for at least one semester. And so we can see that over time, we started at, about 24% in 2010, and we have sort of slowly been decreasing with a little bit of a bump actually in the last year to head back up towards 18%. Absolutely. Being in higher ed or post-secondary ed or training program or employment has increased, which is good. Yes, so talk to me if you would. When you say that, which line do we see going up? 14B is on the rise. Yeah. So 14B is the yellow line. So we've generally, it's sort of gone all over the map a little bit, but we are trending back up. Absolutely. Other noticings or wonderings or questions before I really break this down for those who are not as familiar with it? All right. So indicator 14 is one of the federal indicators. This is district data that they are required to report to us at KDE, and then we are required to report to the Office of Special Education Programs for the federal government. Indicator 13 and indicator 14 are the two that we really think of as transition. 13 is about IEP compliance, but 14 is about post-school outcomes. And so again, this data is collected via a survey called the Youth 1 Year Out, YOYO. That's 1 year after a student exits high school. And so when we say exit high school, this can be a number of things. It could be that they aged out. They aged 21, they aged out. It could be that they graduated with a regular diploma. It could be that they dropped out, but they have left our public education system. So 1 year after that, Kentucky uses a census method, meaning that we attempt to get every single student to whom that applies to get data on them. And we typically have a mid 60s, so like 65-ish% response rate. And that response rate is pretty representative of our population. And what that means is that even though we're not getting every single student to answer, we are getting enough students in every disability category, every racial and ethnic minority category, gender, across the geographic regions, that we are pretty confident that what we are seeing statewide is accurate. Now, we do know that that response rate can vary district to district. And so, you might have some districts that have a very low response rate, and so their data may not be super reflective of what's actually happening for their students. But statewide, it is pretty responsive and pretty reflective of our actual population. And so indicator 14 is broken down into 3 pieces. And so that first line, that red line, as we talked about, is students who are enrolled in a 2 or 4 year higher education program. And we can see that in Kentucky, we have sort of trended down. And we took a bit of a hit in that 21 to 22 year, and then we've gone back up to 18%, which is still less than where we were 13 years ago. This is true for students in general. This is not just students with disabilities. This is not just Kentucky students. This is a national trend that we are seeing, where our enrollment rates in higher education are much lower and have been trending downward, particularly since post-COVID. So we still want to see that improve, because we do know that long-term, a college education is still associated or correlated with having higher wages over your lifetime. Not necessarily right out of school, thank you, student loans, but over your lifetime, it's still correlated with having a much higher wage earning potential. So we want to see that improve, but just know that this is not a Kentucky issue. This is a national issue. That yellow line that's kind of going all over the place, that is 14B. So 14B includes everyone who's in a higher education program. So everyone in that red line, but it also includes everyone who's in competitive integrated employment. And so competitive integrated employment has a very long federal definition, but essentially it's in a job where you're paid the same as everyone else. You have the same opportunities for advancement. And it's like, you're paying taxes, you get paychecks. Not under the table. It's not gig work. It's not babysitting. It's not like my first job where I was running the coat check for the local opera house. And I just got paid in cash tips. Like, that's not competitive integrated employment. But if you're working at like a restaurant, or you're bagging groceries at Kroger, that would be competitive integrated employment. So there we do again see that it is slowly trending up since 2010, although we have not hit our high, which was in 2016, and we do see a pretty significant drop beginning in 2018, and then another one, post-COVID 2021. We do see that increasing, which is good. But really, for both of these numbers, A and B, we've not made huge advancements, right? So 6% is better. Absolutely. Don't want to dismiss that. But that means that there's still 33% of students who are not in higher education or in a competitive integrated job a year after high school. So what else could they be doing? Well, that blue line, 14C, covers any student who is doing something else. So they're in some other kind of training or education, not 2 or 4 years. So this would be like your welding certificate that doesn't lead you to an associate's degree. Or it could be that they are doing gig work. They might be making really good money as a DoorDash driver, but typically that's not competitive integrated, so it wouldn't count in that 14B line. And we do see that that has pretty significantly, we've definitely been trending up from 61% to 72%, which is fantastic. We want to see that bigger. One concerning piece is that we see the change in, and this is a little confusing to talk about, so if I'm unclear, feel free to interrupt me and ask questions. The difference, so C, the blue line, includes everyone in the red line and the yellow line. But the difference that we're seeing in the blue line is not covering the difference, the change that we see in the yellow and the red line. So essentially, we're seeing improvements, but we're seeing more students broadly ending up in who are working not competitively or working in training programs that are not 2 or 4 year college. So we see more kids doing things, but we don't necessarily see more kids doing the things that are correlated with long-term gains in terms of wages through the course of their lifetime. The other piece that we really want to think about with indicator 14 is that, and I see some of y'all talking in the comments about the response rate. Absolutely, we are seeing more could not contact rates. It's really struggling with the response rate. We haven't really done some root cause yet, so we're not sure why that is. This window will close for this year in 1 week. And so once we have the final data and have cleaned it up some, we'll be able to explore that a little bit further and hopefully figure out why this is so that we can help districts improve their response rates. And I just totally got myself off track. My apologies. So all of this information, there's 2 places you can access it. And so I know that Shasta dropped in the chart, or sorry, in the chat, a thing about our SPP APR. So you can access this straight up data and report through the OCL SPP APR information, but you can also go to the KIPSO, which is the Kentucky Post-School Outcomes Center, KIPSO. It's run by HDI, the Human Development Institute at UK. So they are the ones who manage this data and data collection for us. So if you are involved in collecting indicator 14 data in your district, you may already have access to your district's dashboard, but publicly on their website, they provide all of the state's data, and you can play around with filters to look at things like racial differences or disability category differences and all of those pieces. But the one takeaway that I would really leave folks with here is that yes, we have made some improvement, although I would say not huge improvements considering all of the things we've been working on in 13 years. But most importantly, if we have 72.1% of students last year who are a year after high school were doing some sort of education, training, or work, that means we had 28% of our students with disabilities a year after high school who weren't doing anything. They're just sitting on the couch. And that is something that when we think back to all of those words you all gave us about happy adult life, sitting on the couch isn't mentally stimulating. It's not connecting with your community. It's not getting friends or family involved in making sure that you can have as much independence as possible and be a contributing member of our society, which is what folks want, right? Everyone can contribute in some way, shape, or form. That's part of being a happy adult life. So what we really are trying to work through at the state level, and I know districts and surtacs are working on this really hard too, is how do we improve both that 28% who are sitting on the couch that we want to be doing something, right? But also getting more of these students from that blue line, which we want to be really high, but in an ideal world, our blue and yellow line would be pretty close because we want most of our students to be in competitive integrated employment or in higher education, not in this other piece. Rachel, your question. So in indicator 14, no, day programs do not count as anything under indicator 14. In part, there's lots of reasonings behind that, and I don't go into all of it right here today, but I can certainly send you some more information. But when we think about employment first, employment first is the law of Kentucky, and it's the idea that employment is the first thing we think of for all people, and that we assume that we can find a way to accommodate and support people into some kind of employment. So if a day program is providing some sort of formal training program, so if it is an OVR office vocational rehabilitation program that's providing work into supported employment, then perhaps. But if it's a day program that is not really geared towards that, then no, it would not count in this particular data set. Great question. And then Matthew, I see that you said you had students who refused to do a phone call but would answer the questions over text messenger, so you conducted the interviews. That's fantastic. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be a phone call. We see that the districts that have the highest response rates here have been very creative in how they are contacting students. It is a year after high school, so these students are typically adults. And so a lot of districts have done a lot of work around ensuring that they're collecting really solid information on how to contact a student before they can leave high school. Like, hey, here's your house phone, but also what's your cell phone? And also, would it be better that I message you over Instagram? Like, how do I get you this information in a year? And so the districts that have been really creative around that have some really phenomenal response rates, which is, again, what we're looking for. I'm a data geek, and we will move off of data in just a minute. But the better data we have, the more accurate data we have, the clearer our understanding of what's happening is, and the better we can support our students and our districts in supporting our students to get those outcomes that we want. All right, so there's a lot of other data related to transition. I'm not going to talk about all of it here, but we think about graduation rates, we think about dropout rates specifically for students with disabilities. We can also think about access to career technical education programs. KY Stats has a lot of data about where folks go to work and things like that. But this piece, this indicator 14 piece, is the main, not only, but main piece of data that we use when we're thinking about transition education for students with disabilities. So we took all of that data at OCL, all of the data, indicator 14, a billion other things. And we took what the Board of Ed said. And so we said, okay, so what we know is that we want all of our Kentucky students, specifically our students with disabilities, to receive results-oriented, student-centered transition services facilitated through a coordinated set of activities. And those things, some of you may be familiar with the regulations. That's the IDEA, essentially the IDEA definition of what transition services are. But those things should lead that every student is leaving Kentucky secondary schools prepared to transition to that happy adult life. So they are ready not just for the world of work, but also for independent living, for any education or training that they need to do what they want to do in life, and to be an involved, committed member of our civic engagement in our society. They need to have fun, they need to have friends, they need to have relationships, because that's a big part of being a happy adult life, having a happy adult life. So this vision is what, at the state level, we have really begun centering all of our transition work around. Everything we are doing when we think about transition and transition education at the state level, we are centering around, we want to get all of our kids to a happy adult life, whatever that means for them. And to do that, we know we need to be supporting our districts and ensuring our students are getting results-oriented, student-centered transition services through a coordinated set of activities. So when we think about results oriented, we really mean that end goal is in mind, that the student has meaningful post-secondary goals of employment, education, training, and independent living. Now, the regulations state that it's independent living as appropriate. And it is true that in the formal IEP, the ARC may or may not decide that a student needs an independent living goal. And that is 100% true. However, when we think more holistically about our students, because remember, our special education students are general education students first, a big part of what we're preparing students in general in high school is for independent living, right? So we may not have a specific goal in an IEP because it may not be appropriate to have an IEP goal about independent living, but that is still a part of our thinking and our conversations about how we're preparing students to transition to adulthood. Now, when we say meaningful, I skipped a slide. When we talk about student-centered, right? Student-centered, that means that we're really thinking about that individual student. What is it that they need? What is it that they want? How are we determining that? And we're using high quality assessment data and direct input from student and family to determine this. And so this is really about, we're asking kids what they want to do. We're asking kids what they're good at. We're asking kids, what do you want your adult life to look like? And this should start really early, right? We talk with little kids about, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? We should be having those conversations with all of our kids, regardless of their disability, right? And having really, like, this is not talking formal conversations. I'm saying, hey, you're really interested in science. Have you thought about, like, maybe you're going to do something with science when you're an adult? What might that look like? And having just conversations and opening that up so that we're really setting, what we're doing is we're setting high expectations for our students, and we're building their self-determination early on about, hey, this is what I want to do. I can make decisions for myself. And engaging the families in those conversations as well. All too often, especially for students with more significant disabilities, when they are younger, the focus is on the skills they need right then and right now. And that is 100% valid. They need that. But we can't forget to have these other conversations and make students and families aware that there are many options, right? They're not necessarily, they don't have to go to a day program, or they don't have to be sitting at home on the couch. There are other options potentially if that's something that's interested and that's appropriate. But if we don't start those conversations really early, then we don't have enough time to make it happen once they get to high school. And then we talk a lot about those transition skills. And when we talk about transition skills, I think often when I present this and people are like, well, what do we mean by transition skills? They start thinking about, I need to know how to, like, budget a checkbook. I don't know. No one does that anymore. But, I need to know how, like, those very specific adult life skills. But it also means things like, I need to be able to solve my math equations at the high school level, so I don't have to take 4 courses of remedial math in order to get my associate's degree in cosmetology, or whatever. But it also means, like, and here's a big one, because one of our biggest groups of students, if you dive into the KIPSO data, indicator 14 data, I need to be able to regulate my emotions so that I don't go off on my boss when he says something I don't like and get myself fired. That's a transition skill, right? That's a social and emotional regulation skill, but that is also a transition skill because it's necessary to reach the student's goals and transition to a happy adult life. So it's very broad. So we really are pushing from a state level. Again, this is from OCL Transition Education Unit. We're really trying to work with folks to expand their understanding of, when we say transition skills, we mean everything, because again, education in Kentucky is about getting all of our students to that happy adult life. So how do we get there? I know I've been talking a lot. I promise I'm almost done for now. We have predictors of post-school success. So there's been a lot of research done around what is it that leads to positive outcomes after high school. So Mazzotti et al. Did the secondary transition predictors of post-school success. There's one that was done 20-ish years ago, and then they've updated it about 21 years, in 2021, to look and see, is this all still true? And so what they've done is they've gone through so much research, and there are 22 experiences or practices that happen in school prior to exit, not just high school, but in school prior to exiting high school, that are associated with those positive post-school outcomes. There's 22 of them in education, employment, and independent living. So I have a task for you. What you're going to do is you are going to, I'm not sure who's managing the breakout rooms. Someone will be putting you into breakout rooms. You are going to explore this website, this Intaxi Predictors of Post-School Success website. You're going to choose one of those 22 predictors that you're interested in learning more about. You're going to follow the link. Each of the links on that specific website are associated with at least one, most of them have several, research-based effective practices for instruction associated with that specific predictor. And then in your breakout groups, y'all are going to have some time to chat, talk about the predictors you chose, what the practice was, what you learned, and how you might incorporate that practice or a practice around one of those predictors into your specific setting where you are now. Questions before I turn it over to whoever's dealing with the breakout groups?
Okay, this is Bill. I'm getting ready to send everyone into breakout rooms. We'll have 4 rooms of 2 or 3 each. Hopefully this will work well. Allison, how much time will they have in the rooms?
That's a great question. I can't see my notes. I think I said 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes, everyone. Okay, we're going to open up the rooms now. And is it working? Hopefully it's working.
I think so.
Yep, everybody's going in there.
Got Veronica. There we go. I think that was everyone. It looked like it
Looks like
worked.
Yeah,
Okay.
excellent.
All right, so 10:50-ish. Bring people back.
Sounds good. Good information, Allison, as always.
Thanks.
Got a good group here. I think we have just about everybody here in today's seminar, as far as all the scholars.
I haven't checked attendance, but yeah, I think it's pretty good. I really enjoyed the Happy Life activity.
Oh, good. Yeah, we've really been working on changing how we present transition in general, and that's really where we've settled. But it actually came. I'm pretty sure it was something that Commissioner Glass said, kind of off the cuff, but we've adopted it and run with it because it seems like a really good, easy visual to help people get that concept.
Yeah, I really like the way you ground happy in sort of wellness and well-being. It's right, it's multidimensional. So cool.
Yeah, it helps moves us away. Too often when we think about transition education, specifically for kids with disabilities, we get really focused on employment, which is important, but not everything. And so I think framing it this way really helps expand that a bit for folks.
Shasta, are you okay with the room assignments and everything? Does that look right to you? You're on mute.
You're muted.
Yes, and I'm sending everybody just like screenshots and things like that in the chat right now.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
Make sure everybody has everything they need to be successful.
Thank you. So for the next breakout room set, then Shasta or Bill well, I guess Shasta, you just said you're sending. Can you send things into the chat in the individual rooms?
Mm-hmm. I can send
Okay.
an announcement to everybody at the same time, or I can send things to individual rooms.
Okay, because for the next breakout, we're supposed to assign each room a different
Okay.
thing. It's in my speaker notes. Just get like one topic so that we're covering all 4 realms.
And what we'll do is, what I can do is I can, before we go to groups,
Mm-hmm.
I can say, note which room you're in, and then, just make a mental note of what your topic's going to be before. And then
Okay.
once they get into rooms, I can send them a message to remind them.
Perfect.
They still have access to the chat too, right?
Yes.
From their room. So
Mm-hmm. And I can see, so like if they're posting something in their individual rooms,
Mm-hmm.
like I can see too. So I've sent them a link directly to the transition, the effective practices specifically.
Okay.
And then I've also sent them a screenshot, and I've sent them the list of questions. So
Got it.
they should be set up for success.
So then do you want me to assign a topic to numbers 1 through 4, or do you want us to pull that out of the notes?
I can just pull it out of the notes.
Perfect.
Also sent them a visual of that predictors and taxonomy, the circle.
Mm-hmm.
I shared that with them too. Oh, that was really helpful for me as somebody who was new to the content. Being able to see that circle, like where it's all on one page, was
Mm-hmm.
super helpful to me. And I think if you saw, like the message I'd sent you yesterday, was that I thought that for that piece activity that we're going to do, I kind of highlighted the difference between a predictor cluster and a predictor category. So you might want to talk about that because again, for me, someone who was new to this, it took me a second to sort of like sort through it. So I was like, that might just be helpful before we put them into rooms.
Yeah, I can talk about that. Feel free to jump in if I'm not clear.
Mm. And I think that your directions were clear. It just, again, it took me a second to sort through it, and for time's sake, so that we could get them moving a little faster, I was like, it probably would help if we, front load a little bit.
Right, absolutely. I think it's one of those things where this is all very complex, but now I'm so in the weeds with it every day
Oh, yeah.
that it is less complex.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because you do know your content so well,
Right.
and you often speak to people who are familiar with this topic.
Yeah,
Usually,
that they have at least some familiarity.
Right, right. I have very baseline knowledge, and that's just because of our work together. I don't have any real experience with it other than now being a parent of a almost 16-year-old and thinking about what this means for him from the parent side.
Mm-hmm. You ever get into OVR?
I have not yet. We actually have an ARC meeting actually in a couple weeks, so it'll be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I remembered having that conversation with you a while
Mhm.
ago and then never followed up.
Yep. I figure after that meeting, I'll know whether to have conversations about just the 504 and like what the options are for that,
Mhm.
or if we can start having conversations around IEP. So
Mhm.
either way, I still plan on contacting them, but I was like, I'm gonna wait until I know what his direction's gonna be,
That's fair.
and I'll know in a couple weeks.
Time
Esther, you
keeps
want
on
to
moving.
share a 1 minute warning with them?
Yeah, sure. One minute remaining.
And then are you bringing them back, or do you want me to bring them back?
Whatever you want to do. I think it's just a matter of hitting close rooms in a minute. So, but I already have it up on the screen, so I don't care.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, it looks like
Yeah.
you have it up, so that's fine. Great, thank you.
And so, Allison, you're good with us moving into break after this discussion for a minute, then moving into break. Okay.
Yeah, I think the timing actually works pretty well.
Yeah, Des, you've done excellent with timing, and pacing's been awesome. So, all right, you said 10:52, right, Bill?
Yeah,
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 we're
that
moving
sounds
on
good.
forward
I
here.
bring,
Yeah.
I bring them back.
Okay, close the rooms. Hello, Veronica. I saw your face for a second.
Yeah, sorry. It's had a really, really, really rough morning, unfortunately.
Sorry, friend.
That's okay. Could be worse. It could have been worse.
All righty, friends. It looks like we are all back. You're all back. All righty. So, Allison, you want to lead us through next set of conversation or questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was looking or hoping that at least two of you would want to share out and talk a little bit about what your room discussed. So you don't necessarily need to share what you talked about, but what someone in your room discussed. What predictor were you looking at? What practice was associated? And how are we thinking about incorporating that practice into your setting, whatever it may be?
I could
So I'll
go.
talk. I don't know if we picked
Oh.
the right one. Oh, is somebody else going?
And I can. You can go first, and I can go second. I don't care.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. So we talked about inclusion in ours. And you know, I know that inclusion is not new. Inclusion in general education is not new. But we talked about how, and we had an elementary, a middle, and a high school representative in our group, and we talked about how inclusion is still sometimes a battle that we fight. You know, at the high school level, it's a lot of, and at the elementary level, it was a lot of the teachers, the general education teachers are afraid that they're responsible for the content for those students that are coming in their room to be proficient in the content. But you know, I feel like sometimes we just constantly have to explain that that's not what the purpose of inclusion is in that not fully. If they get some of the content, great, but that is not why we're bringing. And we talked a lot about that and about different ways that we've shared with teachers and administration and different things like that, to help them understand what the purpose of inclusion is. All right, I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, well, you raised a really excellent point that I think it's important for all of us to remember, and we say this a lot at OCL, but our special education students are general education students first, and so it's really
Say
important.
it louder for the people in the back. I mean, if I
Absolutely.
have to beg my guidance department to schedule special education students first one more time, I don't know. I might lose my mind.
Absolutely. And so one of the pieces that we've really been working on, I'm going to talk more about this later on when I talk at towards the end of our time together today about some of the initiatives that we're working on at OCL. But one of the pieces is that when we really think about effective transition education and thinking about these predictors, we're not just needing to educate our students, it's also about educating other practitioners, because special ed folks know a lot of this. Now, you may not know the nitty gritty, especially if you're not in this like realm all the time about like CTE concentrator status, what that means and why it's associated with positive post-school results, right? You know, you may not know that, but we know that broadly, these are evidence-based practices that lead to success for our students. And so some of our work in transition education is not just educating our students, but educating our colleagues about why this is important and why this matters. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I think there was someone else who was starting to share, but I didn't see who it was.
Yep. My group we talked about two different things. We talked about the focus on social skill instruction as well. Like, like I had a kid tell me yesterday that because he couldn't get on his phone, he was going to explode. And I just went, no, you're not. And he goes, no, I really will explode. I said, well, that's going to be a really big mess for us to clean up later, isn't it? And I teach juniors and seniors. I can get away with saying that stuff. But but it's also, we also talked about one of the things that I'm like super interested in is person-centered transition. I went to a training with Leeds alum Stacy Hutchison this summer, and like learned a lot about the effect of person-centered transition and really trying to force it into like a getting away from we're doing this transition because we want to be compliant. No, we're doing this transition stuff because we want to actually actively help these kids. And
Yes.
and trying to get, so I'm starting my dose practicum this semester. Like I'm literally just took the first, like me and Veronica are at Western. We're taking our dose practicum this semester. I want to write a person-centered curriculum for my teachers at my school to follow and like kind of create that.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had a conversation with a senior this week starting to think about transition, and I said, what do you want to do? He goes, oh, I want to work at a job that has a 401k and makes a lot of money. And I was like, that does not help me at all, because a lot of jobs have 401ks and you can make money. Like, that doesn't help me. Like, we need to figure this out. But that's all he knows. He doesn't genuinely have interest. But I also talked to another student who was like, well, what do you want to do? And she was like, well, I don't want to go to college, and I don't want to work at a factory, and I don't want to go to a training program. And I finally went, what do you want to do? And she's like, I don't know, but I don't want it to be that hard. And I was just like, I don't know where to start with that kid. But like, and she's a senior. But I feel like if we had started those conversations when she was a freshman, or when she was an 8th grader, or when she was a 7th grader, and like really starting to instill this, if you want a good job, or if you want a good career, it's going to take difficulty. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard to get there. And we're like really preparing them for that resilience that they have to have in the face of it. And I don't think I think COVID has really hamstrung a lot of us because we're not really prepared for that. And the kids are like, don't see any value in it because they know COVID's going to shut the world down again. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you raised a number of good points, but I think a really big piece that I heard in there, one of the things I heard was it was taking it beyond compliance, because compliance is the floor, right? But best practices is what builds the house. And so if we want that happy life, we need to, for all of our kids, which I think we do, we need to move beyond just that floor of compliance. And I did not give this link to you, Shasta, but I can make sure Shasta has it. If you look at Transcen, CEN, they are an organization, I want to say out of Connecticut or Minnesota, which I know are nowhere near each other, but the two people that I know at Transcend, one's in Connecticut, one's in Minnesota. So it's somewhere. But they have a lot of really good resources around how do you start those conversations, like I call it the PPP, which is the person something profile that you can do with kids. That's really about asking those questions. What are your interests? What do you like to do? What are you good at? And then also a pretty good structured family interview to get, thank you, Shasta, to get that information, to also engage the family in those conversations, because, you know, we may be the experts in education, but the families are the experts in their kids. They know them better than we do typically, and the kids know themselves, and there's lots of really good information there. I'd also encourage those who are interested in that type of piece to really take a look at the self-determination predictor. The self-determination is about, can kids make choices for themselves, which feels really big, but it's also honestly really small, because it's things like asking your kindergartner if they'd rather have carrots or celery for their dip for snack, right? That's a piece of self-determination. And all too often, our kids, especially some of our significantly disabled kids or with more significant support needs, they don't get choices. They have very little that they control in their life. And so finding all of the places to give them choice really helps build that self-determination, which leads directly into that senior who says, I don't want to work hard. I don't want to go to factory. I don't know what I want to do. So I definitely check out that predictor and some of the practices listed there, if that's something you're interested in really focusing on. Was there anyone else who had something burning that they wanted to share for the good of the group?
I just had mentioned like the predictor for employment and occupational skills, and looking at community-based instruction. So especially with our students with moderate and severe disabilities, if you're fortunate enough in your district to have that option to do CBI, that's great, and it's research-based, but you've got to like pre-teach the skills in the classroom setting and look at it as, you know, instruction and not just a field trip. So pre-teaching those skills in the classroom, and then having those students try to practice to generalize those skills out in the community setting is it's beneficial.
It takes a long time, but riding on the coattails of Rachel, the teacher in the classroom before I started my very first job, we have CBI. We've had CBI in every district school that I've been in, fortunately. And she had gone out, and her instructional assistants had task analyzed every single possible position at Fazoli's. It was amazing. There were picture supports there, step by step, and I mean it was beautiful. I wish that we could like do that, you know, everywhere we go, because it was so helpful. I walked right into it. My kids, now Fazoli's closed down and turned into a Starbucks, but it was there for a moment, and it was great. And it was really good. But we do have to take the time to do those things, so that CBI has a purpose, and it's not just running errands or going to Walmart and getting a list of groceries to make cookies that afternoon. Those are all great things. Don't hear me say that they're not great things, but we do have to make it more purposeful if it's going to mean anything. And yes, CWTP and pre-ed services are wonderful. We have 2 employment specialists in our school because we have so many kids that want to be involved with it. And then we have 2 outside people coming in and working with those that are going on to post-secondary education, because there's not enough room on the caseloads for our job coaches to be able to work with all the students. It's wonderful and it's great, but there is still a gap there, and we've got to address that. Sorry, I nerd out on transition, and I'm gonna hush now.
No, that was great information. And I would just add CWTP. So for anyone who's not familiar, that's community-based work transition program. It is a joint effort from the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, KDE, OCEAL, and the Human Development Institute at UK. And if your school is not a member of that, you can certainly explore becoming a member of that. But even if you're not, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation has pre-ed, so pre-employment transition services. They also have transition services, which is for kids after they do pre-eds or age 16 or on. And they can assist in doing things like task analysis so that you can then support your CBI. Absolutely.
This is such rich conversation, and I love it. I wish, this is definitely one of those topics that I'm like, we could definitely do like a whole day thing on this, but we won't make you sit here all day. We're going to give you guys a break. It's 11:05, so if we'll give you a 10-minute break, come back at 11:15, and we'll be ready to hop into some more conversations. And those friends that were sharing, again, some of those great ideas and resources, please drop those in the chat. See you at 11:15.
Allison, are you taking a break?
I'm not walking away from my computer.
I don't want to bother you, but I was gonna
Yeah.
talk to you. You mentioned that you had done some things with CTE and students with disabilities, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. I don't know, but I would love to make some of our CTE programs in Scott County more inclusive. And I don't know,
Yes.
like, even really where to begin with that, but like for my kids specifically in our transition program, that's my goal, is to get them doing that and, doing the whole work study, like come to school half a day and then go to work half a day.
Mhm.
Now, barriers are transportation. A lot of my kids don't drive, so they're
Yep.
not able to just leave half a day.
Yep.
I don't know. I would just love to pick your brain on getting with my CTE teachers and trying to make it more inclusive and getting my kids, involved in those pathways some way, somehow, and like just problem solving with that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do that. I can also connect you with Bill Bates, who
Okay.
is our exceptional child consultant for CTE. So he's on my team, and he is dual certified CTE and special ed.
Oh, cool.
But we're working a lot at the state level because this is an issue. We know that there are a lot of barriers in general, and we know it's actually a national issue, but we know that in Kentucky specifically, we do an okay job at getting students with disabilities into CTE courses, but we don't get them through CTE courses.
Right.
And so to do things like that work study, typically need to have taken 2 or 3 courses in a series. So on a state level, we're working on that, but we can definitely think through some of the ways to look at that at a local level. Transportation is always an issue. It's always an issue, but there is sometimes some potential to work with OVR, because they can provide both pre-eds, but they can provide transition services and supported employment during the school day. Sometimes, depending on how exactly they're structured. But yeah, we can do that. If you just send me an email, it's allison.johnson@education.ky.gov. It'll also be at the end of these slides.
Okay.
I'll connect you with Bill and can set up some time to think through some of that.
Okay, awesome. Hey, thanks so much. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Yes, Matthew, they can, for sure.
Yeah, I've had several of my kiddos get their driver's license like with help through OVR. Like someone will come to my school building and check them out of school for 2 hours to take them to practice driving. So
yeah, you can also, and we have not done this a whole lot in Kentucky, and we're really working to improve that. The Centers for Independent Living. If you live in one of their service areas, so Rachel, Scott County is in the service area for Independence Place in Lexington. So OVR is really focused on employment and what can get you to employment. The SILs work on anything that essentially will help a person with a disability be more independent. So that might be employment, but it might also be things like figuring out transportation or housing. And they can work with any age student. They don't. So OVR, you have to be age 14, but the SILs you don't. So that might also be a resource if you're looking specifically for transportation or things that OVR is not able to help you with. They may be able to assist.
Thank you.
All righty, friends. It is 11:15, so I want to keep us on track and on time. So if you are hearing my voice, it's time to come back to class. You didn't know you were going to be serenaded, but you were. While we were on break, one of the things I thought about just really quickly, and again, thinking about this whole thing around transition is that task analysis piece, right? And someone had brought that up about, can students do the things that we're asking them to do? And all of that implies, for those of us that are when we think about specially designed instruction, this is a really important piece of thinking through and about specially designed instruction, which all of our kids have on their IEPs, no matter their age or grade, right? And so this is just one resource. Again, maybe just like a thinking point about thinking through when we ask students to do tasks, thinking about all of the steps that come with that task. This is something that's really beneficial in those co-teaching type of settings. For us as special educators, we're pretty good about thinking about the executive functioning piece, the physical adaptations piece. Like we're pretty good at that. But oftentimes in supporting our colleagues who maybe don't have that special ed background, who don't have a deep understanding of specially designed instruction, sitting down with them and saying, okay, yes, here's the goal. Here's what we're working towards today, linear equations, as an example. What does that mean? If we're going to ask them to solve this problem on linear equations, what does that mean? If we're going to ask them to do a project on the solar system, right? What does that mean? What are we really asking our students to do? And really thinking through that. And I know if you're a fan or knowledge of Ann Benninghoff, this is one of the things she talks about. She's the SDI guru. I want to be her when I grow up. But this is something that she talks about too. And she models her and a co-teacher sitting down, thinking through a target or a goal in the gen ed setting and saying, but what does that mean? What do students really have to do? And that really kind of helps you see, well, gosh, if, Sam really struggles with this piece of that, right here's where he's going to get hung up. It's on step 3. So what can we do to provide supports for him here so that he can make it to step 7, right? And so anyway, that's in there. Just something, again, another resource, another tool, something to think about. Yeah, Matt, absolutely. Combining TA and explicit instruction and chunking, it's a game changer. Absolutely. And I think, again, as you guys, as future directors of special education, already instructional leaders, working with co-teachers, right? That collaborative partnerships. If you're in a leadership position, it's one of your roles is to advocate for your teachers to have those collaborative partnerships and relationships, and fighting for co-planning time and time to work together to think through, so that our students, most of our students spend most of their day in gen ed, right? And so just thinking about making sure that your teachers have what they need to be successful, and be able to do that for their students is something to think about. So Allison, I'm so sorry, that was a little tidbit there. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back over to you.
That was an important and very relevant tidbit, so thank you. Oh yes, Karen, my favorite, incidental benefit. That's honestly the way, for me at least, that I was most successful in selling some of these things to my general education and CT education partners, is like, hey, we want to do this because my kids need it and it's required, but it's going to help you and help everyone else. Sometimes they just need to see that. But okay, so we dove just a little bit into those predictors. And remember those predictors, there's 22 of them. They are research-based, evidence-based. They're correlated with positive post-school outcomes. So if kids are getting those things, those predictors in their school experience, and they're getting them effectively, then they are more likely to have positive outcomes when they leave school. Well, what on earth do we do with that? So our friends at NTAC, which is the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, the collaborative, because they have more words in their name than even OSEAL, have come up with a really handy tool called the PISA, the Predictor Implementation Self-Assessment. And this assessment it's a framework. It's for schools or districts, or ideally stakeholder, shareholder transition teams. So not just schools and districts, but like bringing in OVR, bringing in your Centers for Independent Living or anyone else in the community, bringing in students and parents and families that are working on secondary transition. So that post-school outcomes, moving to adulthood, to determine how their programs are doing, implementing those effective practices associated with those predictors that lead to those, positive post-school outcomes for students with disabilities. So within the PISA, we have predictor categories, and they have essentially pulled this all together again by looking all at this high quality research. There's a whole methodology. If you're a research nerd and a data nerd like I am, go read all of it because it's super interesting. If not, just use their websites. They've got the high level stuff pulled out for you, and that's fine. But what we know, or what you're going to be doing, is that you're going to be navigating to the PISA document, and you're going to take 2 minutes to explore on your own what this whole framework self-assessment looks like. Oh, what happened to my slides there? Doing weird things. And just a little pre-teaching. Is that it's organized like this. And so we have differences in predictor categories and predictor clusters. So predictor category, that left-hand column that's highlighted in like that aqua E color, those are your predictors. And so that's saying like this is all under goal setting. But that cluster, that yellow, is that Intact and the researchers who designed this took all of those predictor categories, those 22 predictor categories, and clustered them into 4 clusters of similar predictors. So things that were similar. It's really just an organizational tool because you'll see when you're going through it that some of our activities or effective practices are going to have some overlap, and they're more likely to have some overlap within that cluster than cross clusters, although you'll see some of that too. So nope, we're going back here. Oh no, why am I going forward instead of backwards? Themes. Okay, so you're going to have 2 minutes right now to take a look at this PISA document, orient yourself to what it looks like. Just, explore. Questions. Did I miss anything, Shasta? Oh, okay, perfect. Then I will start a timer and you'll have 2 minutes to go ahead and take a look.
And when you hop onto that website, friends, I dropped it in the chat. It's the second. You want to look at the second one. And again, just 2 minutes to just self-explore.
We'll come back together in about 15 seconds. All right. Any thoughts or initial reactions anyone would like to share?
It's really eye-opening. I know that you're probably going to talk about the project, the PISA project that we have in Kentucky. But if you do this predictor implement self-assessment, if you do the self-assessment in your district, even just look at it by yourself, it's really eye-opening to see where you need to start. It was for us, at least, our team.
Well, and especially like how you might be doing some things for some populations of students, but not your whole population of students with disabilities. It's very eye-opening.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are both really good points. And I'm not I think it was Melinda who was speaking. Yes, I am going to talk about the PISA project a little bit, and how we're really moving that forward towards the end of our time. But Rachel, I also really like your point, because I think that's a big thing for us to consider, is that we do a lot of transition work um, across the state. Like, people are working hard at transitioning across the state, but it's not consistent, and it's not for all of our populations. We're really it's honestly, it's like a scatter map. It's all over the place. People are doing a lot of really hard work, but it's not necessarily focused in a way that research has shown is really effective. And so that's really our broad focus at the state level now, is to help folks make that more consistent and really streamline it to the ways that we know are effective, as shown by research and evidence, so that all of that hard work is directed in a way that is actually really making huge gains for our kids. Excellent points. So what we're going to do now, because it sounds like some of you have some familiarity with the PISA, but I know a lot of you do not. So I already talked about this, the clusters and the categories. Y'all are going to go back into breakout group rooms. I don't know if it's going to be the same ones, but some sort of something. And so each of the rooms, teams, team 1, 2, 3, 4, is going to take a different section of the PISA. So these are the clusters. So the 4 clusters are student skills, career development, collaborative systems, and policy. And so you're going to take that cluster, and then with that, your team, you're going to look through the operational definition and essential program characteristics for one of those clusters. Choose a predictor within that cluster, and then y'all are going to just talk. What might it look like implemented in that school setting? You might consider some of those points that were just made about, are we looking at this, or how would we look at this for all of our students? As a dose, what role would you have in the implementation for this predictor? Because some of the predictors are very much at the classroom level. Some of them are really structures in the school or the district. So thinking as a dose, what role would you have for ensuring that specific predictor that y'all are looking at was implemented with fidelity and efficacy? And then also maybe think about what challenges you envision implementing this predictor, what it might look like, or what you might have a difficult time, or what barriers you might hit upon. And if your conversation goes off from these questions, these are really just to prompt your thinking. So that's fine. But the goal here is to really sort of start diving into just a little bit one of the clusters and predictors within the PISA and what that self-assessment piece looks like. You're muted, Shasta.
What year is this? Is it just 2022 and I don't know how to unmute yet? Okay. So as we whisk you guys away to your rooms, just note which team it's sending you to, right? Like it'll say group 1, group 2. So just kind of note that if you lose it in transition, just put a message in the chat and I can let you know. And once you guys get into rooms, I'll send you a copy of this image so you can have that as well. All righty, Bill, I think we're ready to go to rooms. Let me go ahead.
You have 10 minutes again, FYI.
Yep. All right.
Starting to move.
Good. Are people going to rooms?
looks like it. It looks
Okay,
like
good.
everyone but maybe Veronica.
Yeah, just Veronica.
Ready.
I mean, it shows that Veronica's in room
There, I
4.
just sent her
Oh.
there.
There she went.
All right. Okay. All right, they've all been, the room has been shared, and then the copy of the slide.
Sounds good. Concerned that I was going to finish really early, but I think we're going to be right on time.
I think you're right. I think cohort 4 is one of our cohorts that's had, I think, the most friends who are at that high school level.
Mm.
I think previous cohorts had more elementary level friends, and this one has had a pretty high concentration for such a small group of high school friends, which is
Mm-hmm.
really exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting. Well, it's funny. I should have looked at the participant list before I came. When I first moved to Kentucky, before I got a full teaching job, I was Rachel's paraprofessional for like 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh, how amazing.
Yeah, she taught with my mom for a long time.
And how long did you say you wanted them in these rooms, Allison?
I said 10 minutes. So I think it'll be
Okay.
11:40.
Okay.
Because
Them
that'll
know
give
that.
me 10-ish minutes to talk about this and just give a quick overview of what we're doing. And then that will give you all 10 minutes for the last bit.
Yeah.
Wanted.
And that last bit, 10 minutes is a real as long as we have about 5, we're good. It's just to get them to reminder of next meeting, and then the survey, that we do.
Yeah, no, we should be good.
Yeah.
Allison,
So-
you may have said this. I know they're looking at the self-assessment. Will they also look at the action planning guide? Will there be discussion of that as well?
That is part of the self-assessment. So I wasn't going to talk about that very broadly right now because the goal was just to get folks familiar with it. I can definitely mention it.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah. Thanks.
And we're in one of those weird places because a couple of these folks are in districts where they were very involved in our PISA project, which means they've done this. But then I know there's some who have no idea, they're elementary folks and they don't know what we're talking about.
Mhm. But I think that you've done a really good job, and I think the resources that you've provided, and that was also why I added that, portrait of a learner thing,
Mhm.
because even though you're not, doing transition planning on an IEP just yet, you're not thinking about that in terms of an ARC meeting. We are always preparing students to be happy adults, and I loved your example of, that ability to make choice. Do I want carrots or
Mhm.
celery? Right? Like that's a really important thing that we advocate for our students to be able to make choices.
Mhm.
You know so I thought that was I think you've done a really good job of tying it back to, um, no matter what level you're working with, it's something that we're thinking about.
Thanks. Yeah, that's why we've really been centering it around the predictors because some of the predictors are very much high school, but a lot of
Mhm.
them are not.
Absolutely.
Give 'em a minute.
1 minute. Let them know. Boy. say too, I think this has been such good conversation and discussion, Allison. We do this a lot, every, once a month, every Saturday, or every Saturday, once a month. And this has just been such good conversation. They've been really engaged, in conversations, been really meaningful and helpful and on topic and relevant. So kudos to you for
Yes, expert level.
Agreed.
Thank you. Yeah, it does seem to be going
Very good. Well done.
Thank you.
Bill, are you closing rooms or should I?
Yeah, you can close them.
Okay. All right, welcome back, friends. We should have everyone back. Yes, we do. Take it away, Allison.
All right, thanks, Shasta. So y'all didn't have very much time. We recognize that, but I'd love to hear from some folks what your group discussed, what predictor or cluster y'all were looking at and thinking through implementation, what role you'd have as a dose, challenges, barriers, or anything else y'all might have discussed related to this. So feel free to unmute and share.
I'll talk again.
Go for it.
All right. So our team was team 2. We had career development, and we talked about work experience and paid employment and how that looks across all levels. And so typically, for our LBD, Gen Ed, or regular education or regular diploma track students, that's fairly easy to implement as long as you have, your job coaches, employment specialists, and things like that in place, and the supports that you have. If you don't, then there's some work there that has to happen. So we address. We live in rural Western Kentucky, and there's not a lot of places. And if there are places for you to go to work, you're going to have to drive. So we have purchased through our PISA grant a driving simulator to help students get their driver's license. And so our employment specialists have also developed a 70-question driving permit quiz. And if you can pass that, you can pass the one at the State Department or at your local county clerk's office, wherever your driver's license office, wherever you have to go. And it's really great. So we have that. And so how do we address that issue in our Mod Severe classroom? Well, one of our students actually has been working, and he did get his driver's license, so he can go. But a lot of schools are doing now, especially in the janitorial section, they're doing student workers, which is wonderful opportunities for us to be able to get those jobs. We have one student right now that has his application in, and they start interviews next week. So we're hoping that he gets that job. So if your school does do those, take advantage of them. If they don't, talk to them about how we could do some student workers. And I mean, they're putting them on the Talent Ed, website where it's a legitimate, application process, interview process. It's really great experience, if anything. So, okay.
Absolutely. And I heard a couple of things there. First, thinking about student work jobs, a lot of districts already have work study as an option, and finding ways to get our students with disabilities, particularly our students with more significant support needs, access to that is a challenge for sure. But for example, a lot of times some of those jobs are like front office aides, or janitorial, as you said, and those are some really good opportunities. But you're gonna have to work with your systems folks to make some of those changes, to change hearts and minds, to change from what we've been doing, to get our students in those opportunities. But absolutely. Also those driving simulators. So there's a lot of work that we've been doing at the state level through a couple of different grants that I can definitely talk more about, although I'm being mindful of our time right now, where we're using immersive virtual reality, so simulators, to build some of those skills in the classroom, because we know that often the CBI, so the community-based instruction, having real life practice, that's the gold standard. But often we need to build skills before we can even get there, or our access to that can be limited. And so using some of this immersive virtual reality equipment in the classroom lets us really extend and expand the amount of practice students get in a very safe environment, so that we can leverage our gold standard real life practice to be really effective when we get there. So those are two interesting points that you raised, Melinda. Thank you. I think we have time for one more person to share, if anyone else would like to share about some conversation that you had. If not, that's okay.
I will just say, like, looking at the policy part in the program of study, it's really frustrating that, like, our school schedule or the classes that we offered aren't really taken, like, you don't take into account students with disabilities and maybe potential pathways for them, or making our master schedule really inclusive. You know, we always have issues with when we offer co-teach and resource, and well, they're in resource, so they don't get to participate in this new 4T program through Toyota because that's only offered third and fourth block. So sorry, they can't be part of that program. And it's just really frustrating that we don't do SPED scheduling first, and we develop a program of study as a whole school. We don't look at the universal design for learning, and yeah, we don't have all the different opportunities for all of our kids.
Rachel, thank you. You just provided me an excellent segue to the next section, talking about when we think through policy and our systems and how we can make some of those changes, because you're absolutely right. I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Our SPED kids are gen ed kids first, but if we're not thinking through what that looks like at a systems level, it creates barriers in our own work and education for us to be able to meet their needs. So what are we doing in Kentucky? What are some long-term, we're looking for long-term success, right? We want to get those 28% of kids off the couch after high school. So what are we doing? I'm going to talk just very briefly about a couple of programs, initiatives that we've got going on. Some of you all have already mentioned PISA grants. Actually, it was from the American Rescue Plan. So out of COVID, there's a lot of money, and part of what OSEAL chose to spend our money on was to provide these PISA grants. And so there were districts around the state that were able to, as part of this program, they created a transition team. They did the PISA. They self-assessed their practices. They made an action plan. There is an action planning step in the PISA in those documents. But so they made an action plan to address some area of practices in their school or district. And then they were given grant money to move that work forward so that they could basically enact the plan they made to do their PISA, to address their PISA. But that was an ARP grant. That was a COVID grant. So that grant has gone away. But we are moving that work forward in somewhat modified ways because we saw some really great success with that. We saw a lot of increased focus in schools and districts who participated on teaming and building together, not just the special education folks, but it requires everyone to be part of that. So we have two big initiatives coming out of our office now. KY Transition 360 and KY Transition 360 for educators. And my boss, Jason, likes to joke that we just got lazy with the naming, but really it was very intentional because we need 360 degrees of inclusion, right? 360 degrees of everything. We need the full circle picture, the holistic view, if we're going to get all of our kids to a happy adult life. But we also know, because we're educators, that there's specific things that we need to do and to ensure our compliance with IDEA and our regulations, but also just because we're in the realm of education. So we have two separate programs, named similarly, essentially, because we want to keep that forefront in our mind, right? We're really going for that holistic view. We always want to think about the whole child moving into a happy adult life. So KY Transition 360 We've really been working at the state level currently, and we're starting to build out to the local level to build partnerships across all of the systems and agencies. Like we've talked about, there's lots of folks already doing work, but we were sort of siloed and maybe a bit of a patchwork quilt instead of a really solid blanket of intervention. So thinking about like KDE in education, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, the Centers for Independent Living, KY SPIN, the Special Parent Involvement Network, talking about families and students, talking about all of those pre-employment transition service providers, pre-ETS, so like JAG, Jobs for America's Graduates. 50, there's a ton of providers for that. So we're really working to at the state level to build communication and collaboration across those partnerships. And with that, we are installing about 20 community-based family mentors around the state. And these mentors are going to be working directly with students, parents, and families to focus on identifying and addressing barriers and challenges to accessing all of these other supports. So the goal at the local level to take all that work we've been doing at the state level and these mentors to directly help students get into services with OVR, get into adult services with our Centers for Independent Living, get into like access all of the waiver programs, all of the supports that we know. Because what we found when we looked at our data is that we have kids who are accessing services when they're in school, and then when they leave school, they're not. And so this program is really focused on bridging that gap so that when they leave school, they're still connected. You might think of it as some people call it a warm handoff, or like we're walking alongside them into adulthood. We're trying to get them into other services. So that's KY Transition 360. Again, we're installing those mentors. It's going to be a pilot first, so it's going to be kind of small first, and we're building it. But so just keep an eye out for those who are working in the future when your dose is very soon, I'm sure. You'll be seeing more information about this as we spread it across the state. We also have KY Transition 360 for educators, and this is really the continuation of the PISA. And so what we found from that PISA project, what everyone talked about being really so helpful was pulling in not just special education, but pulling in general education, CTE administrators, not just special education administrators, but regular education administrators. So, but what we found is that it's a mixed bag of knowledge when we talk specifically about students with disabilities, which makes sense, right? So my CTE teachers don't necessarily know a lot about how we help students with disabilities successfully transition to adulthood. That's not their area of expertise. So this program is going to be available for any Kentucky public school educator. You'll be eligible if you are a public school educator. It is, again, it's going to be smaller to start, and then we're going to be expanding it. But this includes not just special education, but general education, CTE, your administrators, your paraprofessionals, your job coaches. And we are ideally going to be looking for teams of people, kind of like we did with the PISA, where if we have a few people in the same district or same region, because again, it's like with that PISA, we're really trying to focus on building that knowledge and capacity so that then we can expand it. So this program will have professional development. The first go round is online modules, really covering more extensively a lot of what we covered today, but also some real basic stuff about transition post-secondary outcomes. So what is OVR? What are the SILs? And then following that, there will be future opportunities that will be cohorts of those educators. Again, all educators, paraprofessionals, job coaches, administrators, CTE, everyone, engaging in targeted development opportunities. So like in person, more in depth, and then really looking at some of those ideals from the PISA and how do we build this communication, this collaboration around all of this and across these barriers. So those will be future years of cohorts, but initially we'll have these online modules. We are not currently enrolling people in this, but we will be very soon. So for those of you who are in districts, it will definitely be going out through our OSEAL weekly newsletter, the news you can use, but we'll also push it out. You'll see information. I'll make sure that Shasta and Bill and Mike have it to push it out to the Leads Network also. I would anticipate in the next 2 months at most, you will see information about how to get folks to apply to be able to engage in that. So that was just a real quick overview of what we're doing, the high level of what we're doing. This is my information. I am more than happy to connect with anyone and everyone about any questions, issues you have. I can also connect you with other people in my office. Someone had, for example, someone had a question about CTE earlier. We have an exceptional children consultant who focuses on CTE, Bill Bates, so I can definitely connect you with him if that's more appropriate, but feel free to reach out and I will do whatever I can. Shasta, am I turning it back over to you for this part?
Yeah, sure. So, Allison, that made the information was just so amazing and so helpful. Such good conversation and resources. I did put your email in the chat for friends who need it. So just before we kind of, leave, I'm really curious to know, as you were thinking through the information that Allison shared, the information that your colleagues shared, well, there was a lot of great information shared from scholars as well. Somebody just want to kind of share out maybe something, you can put it in the chat, you can share it out loud, something you're going to adapt, adopt, or apply. I'd like to hear from, let's say, at least two people. Something you're going to adapt, adopt, or apply.
Definitely, this is Linda. Hey, definitely going to adopt the better contact process for the yo-yo. Not only did that conversation make me realize that I need to call about 3 more people, but getting my case managers to get those social media contacts, text contacts, cell phones that are going to work would, I think, streamline that process. So we're going to adopt that.
Awesome.
Looking at the PISA action planning tool, like the self-assessment, just trying to get with my former PISA team and even bringing on more people and looking at that tool every year and like freshening our, trying to remember like where we're not great and where we need to improve. And then using that predictors visual and the circle PDF of the different predictors of post-school success, sharing that with my case managers and teachers and saying like, these are the things that we need to be focusing on, using that.
I'll add a third to this. I think one of the things that we need to, and this is, I have a lot of thoughts about more than just special education, because I came from a general education background. That was my first job. And I'm looking, in addition to DOS, I'm also in a principal prep program. So I'm like looking at both avenues. And I'm thinking like a lot of what we do for transition for students with disabilities, we need to be doing with students who are not disabled. And we don't do enough of it. And when in the second like breakout room that we had, me and Linda were talking a lot about in smaller school districts. I work in a very small school district. Program completion for CTE is very hard for us because we don't have as much of an options in terms of like if like I work in a school district where literally a 5A school is right across the parking lot almost from us.
Mm-hmm.
And they have just way more opportunity than we do in terms of like funding and ways to be provided, like to provide different options for students. And whereas we are running into issues with program completers because we only have a limited number of program pathways that we can offer, we are having issues with students that'll change their pathway 3 or 4 times. And then by the time they're seniors, they have no option to be career pathway like graduates. But it's part of the issue is because we're so small, we're not really doing all of these transition services with them that they may get in a Madison County Public Schools or Fayette County Public Schools or whatever. And so that's what I run the risk into, like, and like looking at how can we adopt what we do for special education already, which is all these person-centered approaches, and how can we apply that to just a general education, just mindset of like, we're trying to help these kids get there, and a lot of what we're doing for special education seems to be working. So why are we not adopting that wholesale? So.
Yeah. Friends, that is great information and great feedback. And of course, we'd love to hear, if you've got other things that really just kind of stood out to you, feel free to drop those in the chat. As you think about questions, resources, whatever you might need, again, you can always bring that to the leads team. You have Allison's information now. She's one of the smartest people I know. So I'm sure that she would be happy to share information or resources with you. Just to close us out, make sure that you do the evaluation survey. This will, your information and the tips that you give us, what worked and what didn't, will be really helpful as we move forward. And other than that, I think our last thing is just that our next meeting is September 28th, Saturday, September 28th. So we will see you guys then, hopefully. And that is it. You're welcome to hang on if you have additional questions, but you're welcome to go if you need to go.
Surveys in the chat. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, friends.
Thanks, guys.